The warning. It was another blistering day in Lagos, and Cynthia was busy setting up her jewelry stand on a bustling Yaba street. Her jewelry business was modest, a one-woman effort to create something beautiful and meaningful. She dreamed of making it big, of seeing her designs on the wrists and necks of women across the city. But for now, she was content with her humble beginnings. One afternoon, as Cynthia arranged her display, a man walked by, glancing at her stall. Dressed in designer jeans and a sharply tailored shirt, he looked out of place in Yaba's noisy street markets. His gaze lingered on a bracelet made from colorful stones. "Did you make this yourself?" he asked, his voice smooth. Cynthia nodded, watching as he examined the bracelet. He looked young and successful, with an air of mystery that made her both curious and cautious. "It's beautiful," he said. "I'll take it." He handed her twice the price she quoted, a move that took her by surprise. From that day on, Emeka became a regular presence in Cynthia's life. He'd drop by her stall with coffee or lunch, always showing interest in her work and complimenting her designs. She noticed that he dressed impeccably, drove a flashy car, and often spoke of his work in vague terms, claiming he was an import-export businessman. Cynthia's friends cautioned her, hinting that men like Emeka rarely got rich by honest means, but Cynthia was enchanted by his attention and generosity. Emeka quickly won her over. Within weeks, he was taking her to the best restaurants, showering her with gifts, and filling her life with promises of love and adventure. Cynthia, who had never experienced such attention, felt special and cared for. Emeka was charming, and despite his mystery, she saw a side of him that made her believe he was sincere. But there was one person in Cynthia's life who was not charmed by Emeka's wealth or smooth words. Mama Kemi, the elderly woman who sold fruit and vegetables across from Cynthia's apartment, had taken to Cynthia like a mother. Cynthia often helped her set up her stall, sometimes sharing meals and stories. One day, as Cynthia helped her arrange baskets of tomatoes and peppers, Mama Kemi looked at her with an expression that was equal parts sadness and fear. "Cynthia, that man you've been spending time with, Emeka," Mama Kemi began, her voice low. "I don't trust him." Cynthia forced a laugh. "Mama, Emeka's harmless. He just has a mysterious side." But Mama Kemi shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "Harmless? I've seen men like him before, Cynthia. Fast money, smooth talk, they leave destruction behind them. I can't shake the feeling that there's something very wrong about him." Cynthia tried to brush it off, but Mama Kemi continued, her tone turning somber. "There's a darkness around that man, my dear. Call it an old woman's intuition, but there are spirits that warn me in my dreams. They whisper of betrayal and blood, and they tell me you're in danger." Cynthia couldn't ignore the shiver that ran down her spine, though she tried to laugh it off as old superstition. "Mama, you're always worrying about me. Emeka is just a little mysterious, but he's a good man, I'm sure of it." Mama Kemi shook her head slowly. "Sometimes, Cynthia, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who smile the sweetest." Despite the warning, Cynthia continued to see Emeka. A few days later, he invited her on a surprise getaway to a luxury hotel by the coast, something he promised would be an unforgettable experience. Cynthia felt a twinge of unease but convinced herself she was overthinking. She packed her bags and left with Emeka the next morning, dreaming of a romantic escape. The hotel was like something out of a magazine. Emeka had reserved the finest suite, with large windows facing the ocean, and a private terrace with soft lights twinkling over the waves. He greeted her with roses and champagne, setting the mood with an effortless charm that made her forget all her fears. The evening passed like a dream. They dined under the stars, danced to soft music, and laughed, Emeka's arms wrapped around her as if she were his entire world. But as the night deepened, Emeka's behavior grew stranger. He started glancing at his watch, his face tensing each time he checked the time. He disappeared several times, murmuring about making arrangements, each time leaving her alone longer than before. When he returned, there was a strange darkness in his eyes that made Cynthia feel exposed and vulnerable. Finally, close to midnight, Emeka took her hand, his grip firm. "Come with me," he said, his voice commanding. He led her to a secluded area of the beach, far from the glow of the hotel lights. As they walked, the waves seemed louder, more ominous, and the wind bit into her skin. They reached an old, gnarled palm tree near a rocky outcrop. Emeka stopped, turning to face her, and Cynthia saw that he held something in his hand, a small, silver blade that gleamed in the moonlight. "Emeka, what's going on?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper, but her words hung in the night like a plea. Emeka's smile was cold and empty, devoid of the warmth that had once made her feel safe. "Cynthia, I need you to trust me. This is for us. With this, I'll be able to take care of you forever." His words didn't reassure her. The memory of Mama Kemi's warning, of the spirits she'd spoken of, came flooding back. She felt an invisible presence around her, something urging her to run, to escape. In that moment, the moonlight seemed to shift, and Cynthia saw something impossible, a vision, as if she were standing outside of her own body. She saw herself trapped by Emeka's grip, saw the ritual he was about to perform, and saw his face twisted with greed and cruelty. The vision vanished in a flash, but it left her with a crystal-clear realization: Emeka intended to sacrifice her, using her as a tool to gain even more wealth. Desperate, she took a step back, the soft sand making it hard to gain any footing. Emeka's grip tightened, and his eyes grew colder. "Cynthia," he said, his voice a warning. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." A quiet voice echoed in her mind, familiar and reassuring. It was Mama Kemi's voice, telling her to run, urging her to find strength. The presence of Mama Kemi's spirit seemed to fill her with courage, and without a second thought, Cynthia twisted free from Emeka's grasp, stumbling backward. She kicked sand into his face and bolted down the beach, her bare feet digging into the sand as she ran with all her might. Behind her, Emeka shouted angrily, his footsteps thudding in the sand as he chased her. Cynthia could feel her heart pounding, fear and adrenaline pushing her forward. She sprinted toward the far end of the beach, veering off into a cluster of trees, hoping the shadows would hide her. As she ran deeper into the darkness, she heard Emeka's voice calling her name, taunting her with promises that she knew were lies. She hid behind a thick tree trunk, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She closed her eyes, praying for guidance, and in that moment, she felt a comforting warmth settle over her, a presence that seemed to wrap around her protectively. Mama Kemi's voice echoed softly in her mind, a final warning: remember, child, kindness is a shield. Summoning her last bit of strength, Cynthia slipped away from the trees, making her way back to the hotel. She burst into the lobby, collapsing in front of the night security guard, who immediately called the police. Cynthia, shaking, explained everything, and the guard assured her she was safe. They searched the beach, but Emeka had disappeared, leaving only footprints in the sand as evidence of his presence. The next morning, exhausted and traumatized, Cynthia returned to her apartment. She immediately went to see Mama Kemi, who had been waiting for her, a knowing, sad look in her eyes. "Mama, I should have listened," Cynthia whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mama Kemi gently took her hands, squeezing them tightly. "Some paths are hidden, my dear, but kindness always has a way of guiding us. Remember, greed blinds the heart, but goodness is a light that guides." Cynthia would never forget that night. The vision she'd experienced on the beach, combined with Mama Kemi's warnings, had saved her life. From then on, she devoted herself to her jewelry business, working honestly and embracing her life's true values. Moral lessons. 1. Greed leads to destruction. Emeka's unquenchable thirst for wealth led him down a dark path, destroying the lives of those who trusted him. 2. Kindness brings protection. Cynthia's bond with Mama Kemi, nurtured through small acts of kindness, ultimately became her shield in her darkest moment. 3. Listen to warnings and intuition. Cynthia's survival hinged on trusting her instincts and the warnings of those who cared for her. In life, intuition and wise counsel can be life-saving. Cynthia moved forward with a new strength, her spirit as unbreakable as the ocean that had once threatened to take her. She knew now that true riches come from a heart at peace, not from wealth gained through harm.